Something that I say along the way will touch you. I know it. Let's begin that process of crafting a meaningful life.
Here's Mary Crafts.
Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. This is where we get to take a time to really stop for just a little bit during the week and think about, where's my life headed? Is it am I putting my feet every single day in the direction I want my life to go? Or are my feet being directed by outside forces? Wing, wing, wing. And if that's the kind of life you live, when you get to the end, you're not going to feel very crafted. In fact, right now, it's not filled with purpose because we're being influenced by those outside things. One of the most purpose-driven people that I've met in a long, long time is my good friend, Nikki Walker. And I asked her to come on this morning and talk to us about her life, her vision, what she's doing, how she's changing the world. Remember we talk about it's just one stone at a time, dropped into a pond where our ripple effect eventually can make a change in this world. That's what I'm about. I know that's what you're about, and that's what my good friend Nikki's about. Welcome, Nikki.
Thank you so much for having me, Mary.
Oh, my beautiful friend. Nikki, you and I really haven't known each other very long. Maybe what, 6, 8 months?
6 months? Yeah, about 6 months. But
Not
it was
too.
an automatic connection.
It was. You were one of those women when I saw you, I went, oh, I love her. Seriously. I
I
want,
felt the exact same way.
and I could just tell by the way you spoke, by the way you were living life, by the way that you were really clear in everything you did about what your vision is and who you and what you are about. So let's start there. Let's start in telling my listeners who you are, a little bit about your past, and where you work now, and your
Yeah,
job.
sure. So I'm Nikki Walker, and I am originally from Jersey City, New Jersey. It's the most diverse city in the entire country. And now I live in Lehigh, Utah.
Well,
So, wow, right? There was a big difference between Jersey City and Lehigh, but I love it here. I've been a resident for 5 years now.
let's stop right there. What in the world brought you from Jersey City to Lehigh, Utah?
Yeah, right. I was recruited by a multi-million dollar company to come out, and multi-billion dollar company actually, to come out and run their PR department. So I was the director of global brand awareness for this really amazing company. And it was really out of nowhere, and it was in Lehigh. So I came to Utah sight unseen. So we just figured I should live where I work. And it ended up working out fine. I love Lehigh so very much. Um,
You hadn't been here
Only
before?
once for about 4 hours. I had been here once for about 4 hours, and that was the extent of my knowledge of Utah. But I felt like I was called to come here. Um, and I had just lost my dad, and he was my very best friend. And a year to the day that he passed away, this offer was made to me. So my offer letter had the 1 year anniversary of my father's death on it. And I said, this must be a gift from my father and my father in heaven. So off to Utah I go. And it
I
was
think, Nikki, that your timing of coming here could not be more perfect
You're so right.
because, Utah for so long was so white, so conservative, so Mormon. There was no diversity really within our state. When I moved here, yeah, I just went into a little bit of culture shock as well. But that was for me 50 years ago. Can you imagine the change that I've seen here? And really not just here, across our country
Right.
in
Right.
50 years. I graduated from high school in 1971, and I've seen so much change here. You stepped onto the stage here as we are in this great metamorphosis, not
Mm,
just here in Utah, but I really think in our entire United States, I see this happening for the first time at real base culture levels.
right, right. And you're so right. I've been here for 5 years, and I remember when I first got here thinking, why is everybody talking about diversity and inclusion? Because I wasn't here as a DEI expert. I was just here as a Black woman who does PR. And but there was so much chatter about it, and I learned back in the day, 5 years ago, that the state was losing out on businesses because of the lack of diversity here. And so that became a real pain point for Utah, and something that, the government and the powers that be just said, we've got to fix this. So you're right. I came in at a time that was ripe for a person like me, who's outspoken, and really focused on the needs of others. And diversity is it's not about black and white, right? It's about so many different things, whether that is status in life, or country of origin, or abilities and disabilities, all of these things, veteran status, age, all of these things that make a rich and diverse place. Utah is built for it right now, and is looking for it and hungry for it. And I, through my job, originally, got the opportunity to have a platform to talk about diversity and what it can look like in the workplace and what it can look like in our communities. So perfect timing. I say it's God's timing, for sure, for sure. I never ever thought I would be in Utah. This is when I got the email asking me to interview for the position. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a joke, and I'm like, where's Utah? Is that near Nevada? Like, I had to look it up, and then I'm like, there are only 2% Black people there. What am I doing in Utah?
Okay, so let's stop for just a minute, because I want to make sure all my listeners are on the page of exactly what you mean by that acronym, because a lot of people still are, even though we think we're growing in this area, are still like, what's she talking about? DIY? Am I supposed to DIY this? What are you saying? So tell them about that.
Yeah, so definitely not DIY, but kind of. DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it is a practice that ensures that across the board, people are treated equally or have equal access to the things that are going to make them successful. And here in Utah, we rank 50th in terms of women's workplace equity. And that is frightening. It's frightening. We have so many brilliant women here, and young women who are coming up in this age of understanding their worth and knowing that they can be whatever they want to be. Yet we're here in the state that doesn't recognize that. And we're really there are some warriors out here who are really working in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space to make sure that everybody knows there's a place for them in Utah.
And the reason I think that that acronym is so important, and for us to really understand the depth of it, Nikki, you touched on when you said it's not just a matter of a race issue. It's
Right.
not just a matter of a woman versus a man. And, whenever I use that term, sometimes I'll get back, oh, so you're a bunch of man haters. What
Hmm.
does that have to do with anything I just was talking about? In my regard, being one of the first women CEOs in the state, I dealt with a little bit of that, what are you doing here at the boardroom table? And
Right.
now I sit on 7 boards. And we've overcome that a little bit. But I think a step beyond, that for me, the important word there that I think we have the most growth to come in, and that is inclusion.
Yes.
We are set up as a society to exclude. We are dog eat dog, cat fight women, all those kind of things that we've been taught. I was taught. And I think now with your generation, we have the opportunity to break through of those things. Growing up and in my early years, I wasn't so much excluded because I was a woman. I was excluded because I was overweight.
Wow.
And there was a separate spot for where Mary would sit.
Hmm.
And she she's running a pretty good business, but she really must not be all put together because she's fat. I mean,
Hmm.
and the ability to step beyond that. Yolanda, I call her Yolanda and sometimes Nikki, it's because she has two names, okay?
And Mary is the only person in Utah allowed to do that. The only person.
When we recently had those shootings in Texas
Yeah,
with the 18-year-old in a school, my thought was that young man somewhere along the line was left behind. He was
absolutely.
not included. He he felt this his only way for him to be seen and heard. And with this movement, Nikki, we can change a lot of that. But we're just such a small little army and we have a big project.
Well, just like you said, it's a ripple effect, and one small pebble can really make a difference. You see it in movements, all kinds of movements, whether it's the civil rights movement or the political LGBTQ movement or the Black Lives Matter movement, all of these things that are saying, look at me, I am a human being and I deserve to be treated as such. All of these things started from one person's voice, and the ripples keep going because one person keeps talking and another. And as long as we are truly intentional about including people, because inclusion is where the magic happens, right? You can have diversity all over the place. You can have, people from all different places and classes and sizes and races, but if they don't have an equal place at the table, if their voice isn't amplified just as much as the majority, then we're just playing a game here and it's all performative. And that's what we can't do anymore. Like, we are in a space, like I said, I've been here for 5 years. And in that 5 years, I think the growth of this diversity, equity, and inclusion movement is going from performative allyship, which means I'm just waving a gay pride flag. I don't really have anything vested in that community. I'm just waving, right? To actually doing things that impact those communities, supporting the teens in that community because their suicide rate is so much higher than any other teen in our state and in our country. Looking at Black communities and figuring out how to reduce barriers to entry into the tech industry. These kinds of actionable things are the things that show inclusion and say we're not just saying a slogan. We're actually making impact and improvements here.
It is a big thing. That was so perfectly said, Nikki, that it's not just a matter of saying, oh, I have X number of women working here, or X number of Black people, or X number of LGBTQ, or whatever. It's a matter of creating a new kind of culture. And I think that you're aware that my life took a whole different change this last January when, in meditation, I thought my life was about hospitality. For 35 years, that's what I
It
did.
was
And
right.
suddenly, I was about helping women overcome fear and the fears that were holding them bound. And I thought that was going to be my mission until the end of my life. But in January, I literally received a vision where my higher self came to me. And she asked me just one question. She said, Mary, what is the dream of humankind? And when I heard that, it was the kind of question that you'd think, let me get back to you on that. Let me think of that. I need a few days. Can I call you back tomorrow? I really want to make sure I get this right. But it wasn't like that. It was like immediately my mind and my heart knew. And I said, the dream of humankind is oneness.
Mm.
And she said, that is right. And that will be your mission. And it was an impactful thing for me. I left that room that night thinking, I am forever changed. And I am. I see people different. I treat people different. If I'm critical or judgmental of them or exclusive of them, that has everything to do with me and nothing to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
It's my own imperfections, my own training as a child that brought me to the point where I could look at someone and think, did they look at the mirror before they went out of the house? That has nothing to do with oneness. That has to do with criticism and judgment of me. And wouldn't we love to live in this world where people looked at us that way? I love that, Mary Crafts. I love that, Nikki Walker. They are they are heart and souls. And when people think of that, I tell people, you know why you think that of me? It's because it's inside of you.
Exactly.
That piece that you love about me is shining bright in you, even if you've not found it yet. And if people don't like me, if they're like, oh, she's such a little show off, she likes to speak all the time, then I'm like, is that something that's inside of you? Are you afraid to speak? Do you have a voice that wants to be heard, but you haven't yet found it, and so you resent that I have? And really bringing that oneness issue, that inclusive issue, down on a very personal, one-on-one level,
Oh, absolutely.
and
You
me.
I tell people you have to be the I in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like you have to be the I in DEI. It has to start with you, right? On your insides. You have to be determined to make a change. And those changes may seem small to you, but think about it. If I have a conversation with someone who doesn't look like me and I impact them, and then they have that conversation at their dinner table, and then their children and their spouses go and have that conversation again with their colleagues. Look at how big a wave that has caused just from one person talking to another. We cannot overlook the small things because nothing is too small. Everything works together.
And that's, I think, a great example of how we can deal with that on a one-on-one basis, um, impacting people in our personal lives. When I think about you at Domo, and I think about this big, like you said, multi-billion-dollar company, and you're coming in there to make this impact with thousands of people, how do you go about that?
One day at a time, right? So it really is about this idea that charity and to extend that inclusion begins at home. Um, Really, Domo is this place that I came into a culture that already existed, a culture that really was about embracing other people. And fortunately, I had a mentor in the DEI space at Domo, Cameron Williams, who unfortunately passed away last year. But he and I worked so closely together, and it was his passion was inclusion and diversity in the tech space. And so I walked into like fertile ground, if you will, now as the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion and community engagement for Domo. Those two things go together. Community is really where my passion is. And so I get to embrace the community on Domo's behalf, look at how we can actually make impacts in local communities. So it's about doing, we are a global organization, but we have local roots and we want to make sure that we take care of our backyard. So we're partnered with no less than a dozen companies this year, whether those are universities and colleges or diverse organizations that work for inclusion and stand up to, making sure that people do have a voice. We're making sure that we partner with those kinds of organizations and those types of individuals so that our workforce has access to resources that share about inclusion. That's the other thing that we find here in Utah. Access to resources becomes a challenge. It becomes this puzzle of, well, where do I look if I want to find out about X, Y, or Z? And so, in my job, I really sort of have this gatekeeper experience where, but I don't keep the key to the gate. I give everybody the key to the gate. So people know if they need a resource, if they need help, they can always come to my team, come to me, and we figure it out together. We just launched what's called the community chest at Domo, and the chest is a budget line every month that allows Domo sapiens, is what we call ourselves. So it allows Domo sapiens to request money, request grants for inclusion events that are happening, or community events that are happening, or diversity events that are happening in their own personal communities, in their lives, in their children's lives, so that we now have ambassadors all over the state who work for Domo, who are doing good through Domo, and Domo is supporting that good that they are doing. So, you make big impacts with small steps, and you enlist as many people as you can to get the message out, and you make sure that you are aligning with those organizations that have the megaphones and that are really actually doing the work, because that creates a culture of inclusion, and that's what we want people to come into when they come into our organization.
I love that. Nikki, as you look back on your life and where you came from, your upbringing, your family, your community, your life, what things happened in your life, your personal life, in your academic life, that you think led you to be the perfect candidate to carry this flag?
Oh, I know the answer to that question, actually.
I
Well, I'll tell you really briefly. So I grew up in poverty, but my house was full of love. And so I didn't know that I was poor until I went to college. And I think I was a little devastated when I realized it, but I never wanted for anything, even when times were hard and the chips were down, right? So I grew up in a house with two sisters and a single mom. One of my sisters was disabled. She had a genetic disorder that was incredibly rare. One in 100,000 babies would have it. And at the time, my sister was the only African American in the country with this particular disease. So double whammy for us, super rare. Plus, she's African American. They don't know how this, presents itself in other ethnicities. So there is where my diversity and inclusion background started. Really was having to embrace another culture, the culture of disabled populations. My sister attended a school for a school for children with disabilities. We had nurses in our home. She had physical therapy in our home. We learned sign language at one point. So my life was from its beginnings a study in DE and I, and making sure that she had equitable access to things. My mother was a soldier for that. So I saw that coming up. Then as I grew up, I, had this really glorious, amazing career. And like most entrepreneurs, I was an entrepreneur for over 10 years, and hit a downturn. And at the same time I was hitting a downturn, my best friend, my dad, was very ill and dying. And I began taking care of him for probably the last 7 or 8 days of his life, and let everything go to hell. I just let everything fall by the wayside. And one day I woke up and I was broke because I had been taking care of my father, and then immediately depressed after he died, and then not able to service my clients. And it was this big, snowball effect, and I became homeless. and my son was in college, and I had to make decisions. Do you pay the car note or do you pay the tuition? Do you pay the rent or do you pay the tuition? And the tuition always won because it was important, imperative, in fact, that my son be the person to break the generational curse in my family of not completing a college degree. And he just graduated, so mission accomplished. But in that moment, right, I now have this experience of the unhomed. Fortunately, I didn't have to live on the street, but I was unhomed, and that taught me a lot about a lot of things. Um, in that moment, while I was homeless, I started a ch- I started a give back program, partnering with an organization that would throw food away at the end of the week, good, great food, right? And partnering with churches and pantries in my community, 63 of these churches and pantries. And I would gather volunteers and we would separate all of these pounds and pounds of food, and then we would give them to the churches on Sunday. And I'm doing this not knowing where my next meal is coming from, but it was my responsibility because I knew that there were people who were worse off than me. So again, in my life, I'm always in a space where I'm looking for a way to create equal access for people, regardless of what my circumstance is. So I think, my life has been set up to be compassionate and knowledgeable and able to be impactful in different spaces, in different communities, so that just as a human being, I can share with organizations and share with other human beings what it takes to be equitable, to be kind, to be compassionate, and to really be human in this time where so many things are just inhumane.
There are two kinds of people, and it doesn't have anything to do with the amount of money you have. There are those people who live in abundance and believe that God is going to take care of them, and not that God's going to bring your wheels on meals every day, but that in the end you're going to survive, and that there is enough for everyone. And I don't have to hoard it. I don't have to push you away. I don't have to make you less than in order for me to get my share, my part. And then there are those who live in scarcity, who it doesn't matter how much they have. They're worried they're not going to have their next meal, or that they are enough, or that they have to hoard what they have and hold on tight to it. You, my friend, are a woman of abundance. And it didn't matter what you had. You saw us as a community, as a whole, and that your sandbox isn't often in some field. Your sandbox lives on a beach where it's abundant. And if you get a little low in your box, that's okay. Pretty soon somebody's going to come along and dump some in your box. Because why? You're living that law of abundance, that law of the harvest, that karma, that do unto others. You're dumping your sand out to other people's boxes as fast as you can. And the law of the universe says, if you are patient, people are going to be dumping into yours.
That's right. It's real. It's
We
real.
so many people, especially people like you that are so involved in the diversity field, to be setting that example for us. I remember when I was still in my company and I was getting, I don't know, maybe, let's see, about 55. So I was about 10 years away from retirement. I got this wild hair in my head that I wanted to do a reality TV show, right?
We've all had our moment. We've all had our moment.
So film crew. We did all the filming. We did all the sizzle reel, and I had a PR agency, and they sent it out to all sorts of different people. And I had two companies reach back out, and they were interested in running um, this reality show. The first one was a well-known network, but but they wanted to create rift between my children and me. So they kept coming up with this dialogue to make it look like I was the lord over them and that they hated me and they were always trying to make me look stupid. I'm like, wait, having this show is not as important as my family. No, the answer to you is no. The next group, the only other group that said yes was Oprah's own network. I was thrilled. I was like, oh my God, that's where I would want to be. But they came back and said, we don't know in the long run if we could be interested in your program. I'm like, okay, well, listen, I get better, not worse. And their response was, you have no diversity. We
Wow.
cannot put your show on our network. You have no blacks, you have no Hispanics, you have no LGBTQ. You are a white Mormon show. I'm like, wait, I'm not even Mormon.
You're from Utah.
And I said, well, you can't judge me like that. It's not my fault there aren't more people in this, not more diversity in our state. But it really put it right in my face as I looked around. That was my company. And I did understand their position. Not they weren't just any network. They were a network that stood for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they couldn't have, this bleached white lily looking show. So I walked away from that. But I'll tell you, the next 10 years I was there, I not only just took who walked in my door, I always had plenty of women, but I went after people so we had different races and a different, a different gender orientation. And so that we could show what diversity and inclusion looked like. Because if you came to work for culinary crafts, you came to work with my family, and we were going to include you no matter what. And so it's interesting how this thing that you're dealing with right now, this was 10 years ago, and I didn't even think about it before I sent the sizzle reel out. But I can tell you now, I'm so aware of it. I would never send
You would
a
never.
reel out again. Right? And that's you. You're raising the awareness, and I love that. So, what do you think if people is there a litmus test? Um, I think of all my listeners who are listening and wondering, well, I'm not. Of course, I'm all about that, but are they really? Um, what do you say to people if they say, I want to be more inclusive, but I don't know what the steps are? Um, how do I go about getting diverse friends? All my neighbors all look the same.
Favorite question. It's my favorite question.
Okay.
Because it's the fun answer. And the answer really is step outside of yourself and literally introduce yourself to one new person. One new person that doesn't look like you, or doesn't worship like you, or doesn't have the same sexual orientation as you. And the way you do that is by getting involved with your community. You know, the community is bigger than our neighbor on our left and our neighbor on our right, right? Our community is where we live and work. And it is really up to us to get to know our neighbors. And in order to do that, you join organizations. The Utah Black Chamber has been around for 10 years, one of the most prominent organizations in Utah. And it's not just for Black people. It is a place where Black leadership and Black business people are able to have conversations about what is affecting their community. But that doesn't mean other parts of the community shouldn't be involved in those conversations. And also, it helps businesses to find that talent, right? When businesses are looking for diverse talent, they can go to the Black Chamber or the LGBTQ Chamber or the Asian Chamber and say, hey, can we post here because you have our audience? So, going to cultural events, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but this weekend was Juneteenth. And on the 20th of June In Salt Lake City, there's a huge celebration and it's for everybody. It's at the Gateway. It's free. There's roller skating, there's ice cream, there's music, there's dancing, right? And the governor walking from the Capitol, down with the community. There are so many ways to get to know someone who doesn't look like you. There are festivals in Utah every single weekend. Grab your kids, grab a cooler, and go experience something different. Go experience someone else's culture and make a friend, make a neighbor out of a stranger.
I know that even on Facebook, you can just put in this, groups that focus on diversity and inclusion in Utah.
Yes, yes.
And I mean, dozens pop up.
I'm literally in a dozen DEI groups that focus on Utah. That is not an exaggeration on Facebook. So you are right. They're everywhere. So when people say they don't know what to do, I always ask them, well, what have you tried? What, because if you haven't tried anything yet, then you're not putting forth the right amount of effort. I like for people to come and say, I tried this approach and it didn't work. What could I do different next time?
When you have people who actually, though, don't want what you have to offer, they don't want diversity. They don't want to include everyone in their little bubble. They're happy where they are. And I have to say that there have been times in my life I have felt that way. So, what's going on that people think that? And I thought about this for a long time, and I think it comes back to my old friend, fear. I think people are afraid that because they don't know, they're afraid of what they don't know. How will that influence my life? How will that influence my children? Will I be able to maintain my standards? Because probably those people, because they're different than me, they don't have my standards. The heck? When I was in the catering business and we began to have, now this was quite like maybe 20 years ago, a lot of our clients were coming in from out of state, whether they were corporate clients, convention clients, destination weddings. And I got to meet and with those people. I remember one time, like it hit me in the face. I was sitting there with this lovely woman and this lovely bride. They were completely different than I was. Yet I got to sit there and just watch them. And I thought, you know, they really are just like me. There's no reason to be afraid of them. They don't threaten who I am. And sometimes we think our own beliefs and our own belief about who we are we strong enough to withstand outside influences? Protection mode. Do you think there's any validity to that, Nikki?
Absolutely. Your friend Fear, I have an acronym. I have an acronym. It's false evidence appearing real. That's what fear is, false evidence appearing real. And I say that because a lot of these people who are fearful, they get their information about other people from the media. And, the media cuts both ways, right? And so if I'm sitting in my home and I don't have any black friends, but I watch the news and 30% of the news is about crime and 90% of that crime is committed by people who look like me, who are black, right? Then if I don't know any black people and this is all I know about black people, well, why would I want them to be in my family? Why would I want them to be in my circle, right? But that's false evidence appearing real. That's not all black people. That's not most black people. That's not most people. And just most people do not commit crimes. So most black people do not commit crimes. And it really is a matter of conditioning and socialization that keep people away from other people. And that's just, a very, straightforward black and white example. But we can use, we can see that in all types of things, whether it's with the LGBTQ community or people who are disabled. You know how frightened no, regularly abled people are of differently abled people? They are Right, and they don't know if they're gonna say the right thing, they don't know if they're gonna do the right thing, they don't wanna offend people, so they just don't say anything, and that is the wrong approach. That is the wrong approach. In order to get over fear, you need to facts are on the other side of fear. That's just it. Facts are on the other side of fear. And once you get past the fear, you really can get to know a person on a one-on-one level. It changes your perspective and it changes your worldview. So it's a one person at a time moment that we need to be encouraging people to have, these one person at a time.
And if you find yourself wanting to be exclusive of people, the place to look is inside and to let go of those fears because they are,
Absolutely.
in my experience, false evidence appearing real. And they don't have anything to do with
That's
reality. I
right.
have so many friends who are Black, who are Hispanic, who are LGBTQ, who are fat, who are thin, who are crazy, active health nuts, who do nothing but watch TV. I mean, I have all sorts of friends, but they do not determine who I am. But
That's
together,
right.
I'm a richer person because I allowed them in my life. I'm a richer person because that's why I travel. I've been to 40 different countries in every state in this United States. And if you don't learn from that experience that we're way more alike than we are different, then you miss the point of travel.
Amen.
And you and I are taking off tomorrow.
Yes, we are. I'm so excited. So excited.
We
Canada is
are.
not ready for us.
I'm so glad that you came on today with me and really kind of heighten people's awareness of, first of all, yeah, I didn't think there was a problem. Okay, duh, there is. And what can I do? And how does it affect me personally?
Hmm.
And the global movement that we are involved in. And I invite really all my listeners to learn more about this, to see what can be changed in your life to be more inclusive. It's how I vote. I vote for people who want to talk across the aisles, to bring us together. I cast my ballot at the box and use my voice to say, I see you. I see you trying to communicate and work together. And that our differences are stronger than this separateness people are trying to make of us now. It frightens me at times because I see our country. While many of us are moving more into oneness, there are those who find safety and security in the separateness.
Yes,
We can't be about that, Nikki. We have to stand for something different.
that's
And
right.
that's what I is that you do. And your voice is huge.
Thank you so much, Mary, for allowing me to share my voice with your listeners.
And thank you for helping us craft our meaningful lives.
Listen to the full podcast today and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. Crafting a Meaningful Life with Mary Crafts.